everyone to this DSAA webinar called Engage Reflexivity and Critical Pedagogies in Development Studies, a dialogue with development practitioners. We are joining today from different countries, actually, but I am joining from the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and future, and to acknowledge the invaluable role of Indigenous knowledge in the work we do as academics and as practitioners. In our conversation today, which we want it to be more of an informal dialogue, we have alumni from the development studies, from the Master of Development Studies at the University of Melbourne. They are from different cohorts. We have someone from 2024, 2025, and one current student, and also David Lozada, who will tell us that he's in a very particular situation as part of the alumni and also co-teacher in the program. I would like to actually allow each one of the panelists to introduce themselves first. So maybe David, could you please start?
Yes. Hi, good afternoon. I'm also coming from the unceded land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Melbourne. I'm currently a lecturer in Asian Studies at the University of Melbourne's Asia Institute. Prior to that, while I was doing my PhD, I was a tutor for Denisse in the subjects development theories and development project management. My professional background is in development practice around HIV/AIDS, disasters and climate change, peace building, but mostly in the Philippines, but also in other parts of Asia.
Angelina, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angie, and I'm currently the Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability, and Learning Coordinator for a global program for the climate resilient water sanitations and hygiene at the Arbeiter Samariterbund, South and Southeast Asia. It's a German-based NGO, but our regional office based in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. And my work supports climate-sensitive water and sanitation programs across 14 contexts in Asia, Africa, Central America, and the Caribbean, where I collaborate with country teams, local partners, and regional organizations to strengthen learning and evidence-informed programming. And also beyond my professional role, I'm also an Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity in Southeast Asia and China through the Equity Initiative, where currently I also implement a menstrual health initiative in Timor-Leste, working together with the local partner to strengthen communities' knowledge on menstruations, where we also work with the women war survivor. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie. Tomer?
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tomer. I am an Australian-born Ashkenazi Jewish person living on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation. I'm also a development practitioner working at the Red Cross Australia, on a project addressing isolation and loneliness in aging Australians. I also work as a university tutor for a third-year subject in sustainable development, as well as in my final semester of development studies. I'm currently undertaking research in Papua New Guinea about the decision to repeal the national high-stakes examinations and how different stakeholders frame it. My background as well is in youth justice, migrant and refugee support, and linguistic revitalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomer. Nguyen.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Nguyen, and I'm joining you all today from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. So I'm from the 2025 cohort of the Master of Development Studies at the University of Melbourne, and I just completed my degree last December. I'm currently working as a project manager for Asia Society for Social Improvement and Sustainable Transformation, or ASSIST, an Asian nonprofit organization working on a wide range of social themes and sustainability-related issues. So over my 7 years of working in the development sector, I have worked across a number of areas, including supporting disadvantaged children and young people, promoting women's rights and gender equality. So in my current role, my work focuses more on community development projects. So it's a real pleasure and privilege to be here today to reconnect with my former professor, tutor, and classmates. So looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very
I
much.
see a lot of familiar names. It looks like a reunion for development studies.
It does, and that feels amazing. So, and I would like to introduce myself too now. So I'm Denisse Rodriguez. I am lecturer in development studies, and I am also member of the executive committee of the Development Studies Association of Australia. And as you might have noticed now, I was lecturer of this beautiful cohort of I cannot call you students anymore. You are my colleagues. You are practitioners and you have taught me so much. And that is why I thought that this conversation today was pertinent because, in the context of calls about how to decolonize development studies, something that we cannot forget is that we need to start thinking about how we train future practitioners, what instruments, tools, and skills do we help them develop through the classroom if we aim at changing praxis. And that is the reason why, when I was developing the program for the classes that I teach, I thought about the use of reflexivity as a pedagogy. What do we mean by that? When we think about pedagogy, we're thinking about both a teaching philosophy and a methodology that guides how we develop our content, how we develop the teaching and learning activities, how we design assessments, and how we approach all of these as an integral part that will allow us to meet our learning outcomes. And when we think about reflexivity as a pedagogy in the class, I was also thinking about matching this cycle of thought, reflection, action, and reflection of that action. Because if we are thinking about practitioners that are able to change praxis, it is impossible that we can achieve that if we do not take time to step back and reflect on why we do the things we do and question if we are also the right people to enact certain interventions, for example. And that is what we incorporated in the as an integral part of the classes, as David was saying. It happened in development project management and design and in development theories. So this webinar would be for us an opportunity to also practice reflexivity, to step back and to foreground the experiences, the challenges, and the feedback of our former students and now colleagues. This dialogue today is divided in 5 sections. We will very briefly go into the before the classroom, then during the classroom, and after the classroom when our alumni actually went back to their workplaces. And we will conclude the discussion with challenges and opportunities to broaden the impact of reflexivity beyond individual practices. And of course, we will have time for a dialogue with the audience. For that dialogue, please feel free to either raise your virtual hands or chat or include in the chat your questions, and I will be guiding or I will facilitate the the Q&A part of the class. This is not a classroom. This is a webinar. This is tricking me by seeing all our former students also as part of the audience. So first question for our panelists. On hindsight, when you started the program, did you have any idea of what reflexivity was? And if so, how did you understand it? Maybe we can start with Tomer.
Yes, thank you for that question. If I cast my mind back about a year and a half ago, I think I understood the term reflexivity as maybe synonymous with positionality. So, kind of just an abstract academic term at identifying your heritage, your culture, your assumptions, and pretty much left it at that. And then at the same time, I had a kind of concurrent process coming into the development sector and to the academic discipline, as well as living in Australia, a settler colonial society, asking myself, what right do I have going into this sector? Why should I be going in it? What are my intentions? So I think at the same time I was kind of developing a kind of internal ethical framework, but I didn't necessarily have a practice that to foreshadow I would learn is called reflexivity.
Thank you, Tomer. Who would like to come next?
Maybe you can go first. You can go
You
first,
can go
Maurice.
first, Nguyen. Fine.
Okay, so to be honest, before starting my master program, I literally had no idea what reflexivity means. I mean, even though I had several years working in the sector already, I don't think I had ever heard the term came up in any discussion within my professional circles. So I think the closest thing to reflexivity that I had practiced or experienced back then was participating in reflection meetings after an activity, project, or program. We discussed what happened, what lessons learned were, and what could have been done to improve it in the future. That's all.
Thank you, Wen. Angie?
Yeah, thank you. I think I agree with Nguyen because in my field as well, the word of reflexivity is not really quite common. We usually use the reflections, and that's why when I entered the program since the first time, I didn't have a clear understanding of what actually reflexivity is. Because in the practice, in particularly because I'm familiar with the work of monitoring and evaluations, I always use the word of reflection. So we always done with the reflections with the community, reflections with the organizational team, but and I thought it means the same thing, and because it's talk about evaluations, it talk about evaluating what have been work, what have been not doesn't work, something like that. What I had not really recognized was that reflexivity apparently when I it's asks us to examine ourselves as a practitioners. So it's not just the interventions of what we did, but really questionings like Tomar said about assumptions, values, positionality, privilege, and the power that we bring into relationship with the communities we work with. That's why it's a bit unclear at that time.
Thank you very much. And we were really aware of that challenge. And something that you mentioned, it's very common that thinking about reflexivity as a synonym of reflection. So now, if I may ask you all to moving on to our classrooms experiences in the two subjects. What content, what teaching and learning activities, and or what assessments did you find useful to develop reflexive practice? What did you struggle with or found challenging as a student practicing reflexivity? And also as a sort of feedback for us. Because, as I said, we're also here to learn from you. What would have supported you better to address these challenges? Maybe now we go on the other way around. Angie?
Yeah, looking back, I don't
That's
think that
a heavy, yeah.
that's true. That's true. It's a little bit
Yeah.
heavy because, well, okay. I don't think reflexivity could have been learned through the lectures alone, even though theoretically I was really gain a lot of information in the class. And it was really meaningful to connect theory with the experiences because I came to the master program after 10 years working in the field. So there is also a big kind of burden, I would say, because I think I have experience, but apparently when coming into the class, there are a lot of new things I gain in the classroom, including the reflexivity. And in my case, uh, when I participated in the reflexivity theory, or so in the lecture class, the seminar, etc. I did what I call with reflexivity journals. Like I just put what is actually my power, what is actually my privilege. And when I did the reflexivity journal, it's particularly valuable because this writing required me to articulate assumptions that I didn't even realize I held. And I found the assessment were not assessment, assignment were from you, from of course from the program, were very useful because they weren't about reproducing theories, because they actually challenged us to interrogate my own practice. For instance, like when I said interrogations, it seems like it put me into the corner, like, hey, I already have this experience in the field working with the community for many years. And I thought I knew my positionality. I understand I'm coming from urban area in Indonesia, for instance, and then I work with village communities. But then when I write the assignment, my reflexivity journal raised me a lot of questions like, so did I reproduce the same coloniality? Was I wrong the whole time? But on paper, like my project was successful. So it seems like, it put me into the corner that I cannot answer at that time. And then these all questions led me into uncertainty. And I think the most difficult part is to become comfortable with the uncertainty. And as a development practitioners, I think we always train to identify problem and solutions, but reflexivity also asks me to pause, to think whether the solution is really a good solution for the community or not. So yeah, it's this really challenged me, but I find it very useful to really, exercise my thoughts, exercise my feeling as well.
Thank you, Angie. Gwen?
I think in terms of the two subjects, the development theories and development projects, so I took both of the subjects in my first semester. So it was quite challenging, to be honest. But I also find that the reflexive essay as the assignment is the most useful learning activity for me to develop my reflexive practice. But I think the two subjects, the reflexive essay of the two subjects, help me understand and practice reflexivity in two different ways. For example, for the development project, the reflexive essay asks us to reflect on our own experience and to see whether we have changed. So for my essay, I chose to write about participation, and I realized that I had some misunderstanding about participation in the past, which led to my failure to meaningfully engage the communities in the project. And for the development theory subject, I think the reflexive essay uh, uh, did not ask us to examine ourselves, but to examine the theories that we learned in class and position the theories in our country context to see whether it worked or it didn't work. So I think this practice links to brought the conversation around decolonizing development. So like when we bring something new or we learn something new and we want to bring it into our communities, we have to put it through reflexivity to see if it's really a good fit and can it adapt to our own context. Yeah. And for the challenging part, I think it's because the our own experiences are usually very complex, and within the assignments, the constraints of the assignment, the word limits, it's hard to encapsulate and capture all the complexities of our own experience. So I still remember one comment from David on my essay was that I think it's better if you elaborate more on the experience that you detail in your essay. But within 2000s, I think it's quite challenging to tell all of the aspects of the experience. Yes.
Thank you, Nguyen. I saw Tomar nodding a lot. So
Yes, I remember all the feedback from that essay as well.
No comment.
Would you like me to continue?
yes, please.
Okay. No, I have nothing else to say. No, yeah, I will. I think to both of your points, Angie and Nguyen, I think like the assignments were really critical in developing that reflexive practice early on. Like you knew, and it was my first semester, first subject, first assignment. So it was a great introduction to the discipline, really. And for that first assignment, which asked us to examine a development theory through kind of the lens of the country that we're living in, but also our personal experience, kind of bringing those three components together. I think I learned a lot about, yeah, the assumptions that I held that I wasn't even aware of. So, for example, I examined modernization theory. So if anyone here is from development studies, I'm sure they know. But if, in case you're not, modernization theory is the theory that suggests that all countries, all societies develop in kind of linear phases. So they move from traditional agrarian societies through to kind of a modern society. And I was at the time applying this to my work, my former work in the migrant and refugee space. And then alongside that, reflecting on my own family and my experience, my heritage as my family moved from Poland and Lithuania to Australia, and kind of thinking about the cost of integration, the cost of fitting in. So how a lot of language and rituals and culture were kind of shed in the process of assimilation. So kind of learning about the process of conditional assimilation, like you need to kind of find ways to belong, which means to not diverge from kind of the cultural norm, which is a very common part of, I guess, like Western imperial kind of coloniality. So yeah, essentially staying invisible. And I think the insight from this project was that I realized that that whole narrative that I had grown up with about this kind of the hardworking migrant, the story of success of integration, was not a neutral process. It involved a lot of cultural, what did they say, culturicide, epistemicide, like a shedding of the kind of characteristics and traits of your heritage, and also challenging the assumption that I grew up with was that that was a fair trade to be able to assimilate. Like, you have to go through those processes to be able to assimilate and live in Australia. So I think kind of in summary of that project, it just helped me see what my assumptions were, not to necessarily challenge them, but just to kind of recognize them, which I think is a really key part of reflexivity. It's not about changing your assumptions, but knowing that you have them and knowing where they are appearing. So I think the struggle within all of that is how that kind of reflexivity and reflection can become quite unproductive. You can get stuck I'll use my I statements. I got stuck in these kind of cycles of self-criticism and guilt, kind of thinking about what it means for me, a white Australian, to enter the development sector. And then I think another struggle within reflexivity is kind of the romanticization that you can end up with. So kind of thinking about other people's perspectives so much so that you're doing it uncritically, so that you're not really thinking reflexively. You're just losing nuance altogether. So that's kind of the challenges that I began to face once I started developing that reflexive practice after that assignment. And then just to the kind of advice about future reflexivity in university. I remember in my first semester, I was really seeking out those kind of hard conversations. I would book times with with professors. I remember even hanging around after class, speaking to David, just asking kind of the kind of philosophical questions about what it means to enter the development sector and having space to just kind of informally have those conversations. And I think that would be a really, really valuable component to add to kind of the curriculum at every stage, really.
Thank you very much. That is actually very, very valuable feedback for us. And David, moving on from the experience of being taught to the experience of actually teaching reflexivity, when I know that you also struggle with what reflexivity was at the very beginning, what can you share with us?
Yeah, so this is all yeah. So I started tutoring in 2022 with Denisse. Um and by that time I had 6, 7 years of development practice experience plus the Master of Development Studies. But I had no idea what reflexivity was. I was like, okay, is this reflection? And Denise was always like, no, it's not reflection. But I guess also coming from the development practice, it's kind of understandable why a lot of us don't have any idea of what reflexivity is, especially in the global south or in developing contexts. It's almost I wouldn't say it's not I wouldn't say it's resistance, but it's almost like there's no time for it. Reflexivity falls into this area of paralysis by analysis, right? Like more you analyze a situation, which says a lot about no, just do it. Just do this project, just implement it without really having the space to step back. But as Angie was pointing out, like the uncomfortability of doing reflexivity. If you think it was uncomfortable for you, imagine for me. every every semester I had like 100 people, where consultations sometimes end up almost, it end up very personal, right? And like also having to manage that, like, okay, I'm here to help and like assist you with your assessment, but because the assessment is around your own reflexive practice, um, I had to develop my own strategies of like, okay, how do I help in terms of just the assessments, and while still being detached, because I at the end of the day I have to mark your assessments. But I had to say it was also kind of weird because I was situated here at the Asia Institute, and I would have 2 days straight of consultations for the assessments. Um, and some people end up walking out of the consultation classroom, like meeting room, like crying or in tears, and people are like, what did you do? I'm like, no, I didn't do anything. It's the process, right? So it's also it is confronting, especially so. And in terms of marking the assessments, that's why most of the comments I would give would be around format and structure and like what you could have done more, because you can't really critique people's personal journeys and personal reflections. Um, but yes, so it is confronting, and at the and finally, in terms of also the classes, like having read everyone's reflexive essays, I almost always feel guilty in terms of like, okay, I have to say something about myself, because I feel like people bear their hearts out in the essays. So I have to also be sharing my experience, which I guess, like, the process of reflexivity, in that process you have to be honest of the mistakes you did as a development practitioner, which you don't really want to hear from someone tutoring or someone teaching, like, oh, I messed up in this project, or these are the downfalls of my project. But that honesty actually allows students, I think, and practitioners, to also be honest about their own experiences. So by allowing yourself to be vulnerable and talking about your previous projects that didn't really work out, or the mistakes you made, allows you to do so, I think.
Thank you very much. And what David explained now, it's that balancing act that as pedagogues, we always have to take care or take into consideration pedagogies of discomfort and pedagogies of care. Balancing, like that's a balancing act that happens behind the scenes, because we acknowledge the development of reflexivity, as David was saying, it is a journey. And it necessarily goes through that confronting moment when you look at yourself. And we tend to be hypercritical with ourselves also, as Tomer was saying, and we can also fall into that questioning absolutely everything and not moving forward. So it's a constant and it's a learning process, I think. And when we get to speak a little bit about um, how useful it has been in your workplaces, that's where you will be able to elaborate a little bit more on that. And in that sense, if now we can get into anecdotes, and if you could share in terms of your experiences after you graduated, if you can share an anecdote of an opportunity that you have to apply reflexivity, either as practitioners or scholars, we would really, really appreciate that. So maybe if we can start this time with when?
Uh, so there's one story that happened shortly just right after I returned to Vietnam. So prior to my master program, I already had several years in the field, and I had a lot network with a lot of professionals and also community-based organization. So after I returned to Vietnam, I was approached by a community-based queer women-led organization, and they wanted me to help them to conduct a small need assessment research project with their communities. So I have a very close relationship with this group because many of us had previously worked together for several years in another women-led organization. And I was deeply honored that they trusted me with this opportunity because the queer women's communities in Vietnam often have very limited visibility due to social stigma. So if this research could potentially become one of the first study focusing specifically on this group. But so I wanted to help them, and I wanted to use the knowledge and skills I gained from my master program to support their work. So I immediately agreed to help them. However, as I moved through the planning process, I started applying reflexivity more critically and began questioning whether I was actually the most appropriate person to lead this project. So I started because I'm a straight woman, and this research and project focused on the queer women communities. I realized I did not share the same lived experiences of them, and I started to question whether my role as an outsider might unintentionally shape the whole process and influence the interpretation of the community's experiences. So I wrote down these reflections and I shared it with the colleagues from that organization. And I told them that I did not think I was the most suitable person to lead this activity. And yeah, so, and I also told them that I feel like there are a lot of talented women in your communities that can lead this activity rather than me. So I came to the conclusion through Reflexivity that my role should be to support them and create a space for their community members to lead this activity better than me. Yeah, so that's my experience of applying Reflexivity.
Thank you, Wen. And I guess that is part of the confronting and challenging processes, because one of the main things that we learned is that sometimes we are not the best place people to lead these projects, and it also, and I probably that's something that we might hear later. It is also part of, and you're very brave because many times ego comes first. So it was a great example of what it actually entails to implement it in the workplace. Tomer?
Yes, well, I think it's a great. My anecdote is quite similar to Nguyen, but I think it kind of goes in a different direction. So thank you for sharing that, Nguyen, already. So I want to share about my current project that I'm working on as part of my master's thesis. It's a research based in Papua New Guinea about the repeal of the national high stakes testing and particularly the selection mechanism. So whether or not these exams result in students progressing to the next year level or not. So right away, when I was on the outset of this project, I started asking some of those important questions. Why am I doing this? Am I the right person to do this research? What kind of expertise or what kind of expertise am I claiming to have on this subject? And a lot of the answer to those questions I'm still learning about because it's an ongoing practice. But I think it helps me to kind of understand that this project was going to be one that I needed to engage with really sensitively and recognize that I am an outsider and I'm working with insiders, and then particularly sensitive given the colonial relationship that Australia has with Papua New Guinea. So when I asked myself, am I the right person to do this research? The answer was, well, no, not really. But I think there is a way to go about this that platforms the right voices and acknowledges my kind of subjectivities throughout. So that was kind of the way that I approached the start of the project, understanding that I'll never be the expert on this matter. And that was a really helpful position to start from, because it meant that, and as you were talking about Denisse, like the ego wasn't really there. I've never been, and as I continue to work on this project, been claiming to understand what is happening. But I do believe that I can create a project that platforms the voices of people who do. So rather than trying to do research as if I'm understanding the perspective of the people with lived experience, it's about using their voices to express the kind of phenomenon that we're looking at around national examinations. As well, in the literature, reviewing kind of the literature, not only engaging with Melanesian and decolonial methodologies, but also engaging with them critically, because as I mentioned earlier, it's not about romanticizing these things either. It's about understanding them and understanding that you don't understand them as well. So yeah, trying to carry that through to the interview stages as well. And I remember a lot of things coming up in this stage that really, despite all of those big questions I was asking, caught me off guard, like people talking about the ways that they use discipline or manage their education in a kind of local environment that I would just inherently compare with Australia as the kind of benchmark, as what I'm used to. And then trying to, acknowledge that I'm doing that, and not necessarily stop doing that, but acknowledge how that is shaping the way that I'm listening, the way that I'm engaging, the way that I'm asking questions. And then at the same time, through analysis, when applying that development theory, doing that kind of critically as well, understanding that I won't understand these assumptions. I won't understand the lived experience of what I'm researching, and I don't really have to, but I can continue to engage with it as an outsider who understands my position, and then consult with people who do understand it as well. So in that, I think reflexivity is really great, because I think it is important to have all sorts of different perspectives when understanding these complex issues, even if you're not from the country. But I think it's important to do that really slowly. And I think reflexivity does slow the process down quite a lot. And it means sitting in a kind of state of productive discomfort for a really long time, and acknowledging what my biases are as well. And this project is ongoing. I'm continuing to be reflexive. So watch this space and we'll see what happens next.
Thank you very much, Tomer. And Angie?
Right. In my case, I think I have a specific example from the I would say beyond professional roles that I mentioned. I'm part of the Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity in Southeast Asia and China. So under this fellowship program, it's basically talk about the health equity. And our first induction year, we met with our cohort and we particularly discussed what is equity. And by using the word of equity, we talk about the colonizations. We also use what we call with the empathy exercise. So having the empathy exercise, apparently it put me again on the reflexivity because, like I graduated in 2023 and then in 2024, I got this fellowship having like months of empathy exercise, like really push me on the everyday, I would say everyday exercise on reflexivity. And apparently it develops over time, the way how I think, the way how I react. However, it's not as easy as it is because when I try to react, there is also external factors, I would say, external yeah, influences how other people react, how other people also understand one particular issue, for instance, because at the same time, when I go back to my organization, ASB also talks about decolonization and localization. And of course, at the organizational level, there is a different understanding in decolonization itself. So uh, it's really at the same time helped me, but also challenged me as well on how I put myself uh, to to work on this issue at the uh, level of understanding in terms of reflexivity. And then when I came to the second year project under my fellowship grant, I go to Timor-Leste and then I work together with local partners there that implement the menstrual health initiative. And particularly when I visited Timor-Leste, I worked directly with student girls and women war survivor who actually survived from Indonesia colony. So I come from Indonesia, my country in the past colonized Timor-Leste, and there are many women who are not uh, because they were not combatant, but they were part of the survivor, and there are a lot of trauma that they carry. So by having again the classroom discussions in Australia and then in my fellowship program and then discussions at my organizations, this go through my practice for the interventions in Timor-Leste. All these reflexivity practices reminded me that I couldn't interpret cultural practices, cultural barriers through my own lens. I thought, oh, maybe it's just because the trauma that they carry for the last 20 years. That's why they couldn't really speak up about sexual reproductive health and rights, for instance. But apparently it's not because they refuse to speak Indonesians. They cannot speak English. They only speak Tetum. Meanwhile, I only speak English and Indonesia. So then apparently it's not about just quote unquote just trauma because of the mental health, because of what happened in the past, but also there are historical, cultural, social meaning behind them when they interact with me. So this kind of reflections, again, I would say the word reflection, reflexivity, change how engage with community members. Even though I work with a translator, even though I work with a local partner, but still it's interconnected and I couldn't really explain it in a way that I couldn't share it because we have to experience ourselves in this dynamic. And yeah, at the end of the day, I could not position myself as an expert to bring solution, even though, oh yeah, I understand reflexivity. Oh, I got the class of decolonizations. Oh, I learned about equity. I exercise empathy many, many times, but
I think Angie got frozen towards the end.
Mm.
But that was a great. I think you are back, Angie.
Yeah, it's a bit breaking. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Just a little bit, no worries.
Yeah, I just
Still breaking.
curiosity and humility. That's it. I would say.
Thank you very much, Angie. And your experiences are the um, kind of like they show that as much as we want to prepare you in the classroom for those very confronting moments, it is the moment where you are facing that actually you start connecting what you have learned, and it's and as you have shared the same experience, it is not easy. It is a continuous process. Um, and there is it also I don't know, it fills me with a lot of joy to know that you actually could in your workplaces see what the value of it is, even if it also pushes you back to not be leading a project or something like that. But I do think that that is how we want to encapsulate the effect of reflexivity. And a little bit of actually time flies when you are having fun or when you are learning with your former students. If we could reflect before opening the questions from the public on the broader impact, kind of like thinking about challenges and opportunities that you have had or you think that you might have in the future, to share what you have learned and practiced about reflexivity with your peers, networks, Tomer with your students, and also David. What strategies or how have you taken the opportunity to share what reflexivity is with peers, networks, what obstacles have you faced? Maybe if we start with David.
Yeah, so it's kind of sad now because like I'm in not sad, but like I'm now in Asian studies, and actually I think some of my students in human rights in Southeast Asia is here now. But yeah, so it's a matter of trying to apply reflexivity across different subjects now. For me, like that's my journey. Or like that's where I'm turning to. So like I think in Asian studies in general, it usually stops at reflection, not really reflexivity as a strategy, as a methodology, as as a pedagogy as well. However, like in development practice, which and like I think we got really good examples with Angie, Tomer, and Nguyen, but I think generally there's still bigger structural barriers in terms of how do you use reflexivity, right? I mean, what Nguyen said of like, oh, saying actually no to a project and trying to step back is very noble. I don't think a lot of people do it, especially with the shrinking funding in development assistance, right? And aid. So I think there's still a lot of structural barriers in terms of resources, in terms of space to actually be reflexive. I think that's a challenge that still confronts a lot of development practitioners. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with David also. Sorry for jump in, yeah.
No, no, jump in.
Yeah, because when it comes to resources, space, and everything, it's never come with individual. I would say it's not just individual, but also probably, let's say, in the development practices, it's not just individual, but also organizational. As an individual, as a practitioner, development practitioners, we always attach with organizations, right? So I think practicing reflexivity is not just individual challenge, but also organizational. And we as practitioners and also many practitioners out there genuinely wants to be reflexive. I would say everyone's quite open with the reflexivity, but our work are within the system that shaped by donor requirement, donor compliance, reporting deadlines. logical framework, theory of change that already set up before we implement the project sometimes, right? So, and also the accountability framework itself, because we have to report to the donor. At the same time, we have to be accountable to the community as well, right? So this kind of intersections, I think, really shape how we are able to do reflexivity or not. The organizations that I work with currently, we are quite open because we are trying to see the decolonizations and really looking forward to really implement the localizations. But I with even though we are quite open, there is still donor under us because as an international organization, we're just intermediary, right? But there is also donors, governments that really shape us the way how we implement the projects. Like this needs to be meet the deadline. It needs to be submitted next month. It needs to be implemented by this month. So we don't have space. We don't have time to do reflexivity properly. And meanwhile, as we discussed previously, that reflexivity asks us to slow down, question assumptions. Those things are really almost impossible with this kind of time frame. So to me, these two logics really a little bit don't always align. So that's why I think not just practicing on everyday basis, but also we need to really influence the organizational level to really address the structural barriers that we already discussed now.
Thank you, Angie. And that is one of the big paradoxes, isn't it? We need time in order to step back and reflect on our actions, but time is never our friend when you are doing development with all those different very short timelines, isn't it? Tomer, could you have something?
Can I say something before Thomas, please?
Of
Before,
course.
because I think the important thing is also dedications. Yeah, we need to dedicate ourselves. We need to dedicate space for ourselves as well. It's not just that we are provided by organizations, but we also need to dedicate to ourselves. Sorry, Thomas. Time to you.
No, I think that's really insightful, Angie, and thanks for jumping in and saying that. And I think, yeah, absolutely, education is a really, really important piece to the puzzle here. So I have, yeah, I guess two small examples that I'd like to share. One, to both your points, Angie and David, about the kind of structural barriers. So our work at the Red Cross, we're working on a nationwide project. So just that means we're trying to serve a whole lot of different people with lots of different needs. And for that reason, it's very rigid. And it means we have to get creative in how we offer culturally responsive support to people. So for that, I developed a session about global perspectives on aging, looking at different perspectives that people have, different assumptions from different cultures about how they view aging. So looking at South Asian, Pacific, and different traditional owner perspectives from here in Australia, and asking my colleagues to reflect on what are the assumptions they have when it comes to aging. Like when they think of the word elder, what value does that hold as opposed to elderly? And trying to challenge some of the assumptions, and the tangible outcome of that is changing the language that we use. So that allows us to be kind of reflective in quite an outcome focused way. And then again, through education, working as a tutor at the university gives us a great opportunity to get creative in our tutorials. So one week we were learning about environmental gentrification last semester. So the way that we explored reflexivity in that is we all became we did a role play activity. So we used one of the suburbs here in Melbourne where lots of the students lived, and everyone was given a different role. Someone was the planner, NGO, a long-term resident, an artist, and we all had to kind of embody these characters as the situation with environmental gentrification unfolded. And at the end, it was a process of understanding like what was success in this case study for you in your character. And then the takeaway there was about understanding how to look through other people's perspectives as well, what kind of assumptions they hold. And by understanding other people's assumptions and values, you can better see your own as well. So I think there are lots of great creative and even fun ways to educate about reflexivity. And as a student of Denisse and David, I definitely experienced those, and I feel very grateful to be able to pass that on to my colleagues and students as well.
Thank you, Tomer. And when?
I sort of agree with Angie that the reflexivity should not be just what individuals or practitioners do, but also the whole organization that are affiliated with. But I think organization is also made up of humans. So I just want to start small by influencing the people around me, talk to them, my fellow colleagues and my peers in my professional circle about what is reflexivity if they have never heard of it. And I did do it after I came back to Vietnam over just some informal conversations or catch up meetings over coffee. So I just share with them like I don't think we should just do reflection after we finish an activity or project, but we also have to do some reflection before initiating or planning a project on intervention to see if there's any remaining issues that we have to address before we start the project on activity. And I think by influencing the people around us to incorporate reflexivity as their own professional habits, we can slowly build a group of people and then the whole organization of practitioners who actually apply reflexivity in their work.
Thank you very much, Nguyen. And I guess that's also a great way of thinking about reflexivity, considering that there are many structural barriers and challenges, as you have mentioned, but also recognizing that there is still space that we can spaces that we can inhabit in order to share it with our networks, share it with your students. It's great to know that the legacy continues with Tomer and David. That is amazing to hear. As I was saying, it's impressive how time flies. I maybe would like to ask if the audience have one question or one intervention, because I wouldn't like to finish the conversation without opening space for at least one participant in the audience to share.
Or if anyone who wants to share how they've practiced reflexivity, I think 80% of the people took the class. Are we just talking to ourselves? To our like former now colleagues. Yeah, Lan.
Hi, Lan.
Hi everyone. Hey. I always wait for other people to ask question, but if no one has any burning question, let me ask mine. I wonder how or if any of you has ever encountered any issues within the structure, the workplace structure, or within with the state when you practice your reflexivity, because some states do not like reflexivity at all. And especially when you work in the global south, you tend to find yourself working with a lot of small size, medium size, local civil society organizations, or even community-based organizations, who for whom reflexivity is not a good thing. And how would you negotiate the tension between your desire to be reflexive and the established way of doing things?
Can John with the
Yes, Angie.
yeah. I wouldn't say this is the best answer. Of course, there is no best answer, but thank you so much for this really great questions, Lan. I'm currently working with the international organization. We got funding from the government, of course, international government, not Indonesian government, and then we implement together with local partners. And so we then become the intermediary who kind of fund channeling to the local partner. So I agree this is something that we need to really negotiate this.
Did she?
We lost her
Humanitarian
again.
We lost
organization.
Angie in the middle. Oh,
No, I'm sorry.
you're bad.
The internet was really bad here. So basically, we really have to negotiate because we, as humanitarian organizations, we always work in short-term period, right? So particularly on the emergency responses, or even in climate-sensitive areas where we don't have enough time to really understanding the community and et cetera, et cetera. So what we do basically is conducting reflexivity by having discussion with the community, but then we also put in our report in written because and then we also make a publications. We do have the informed concern with the communities, and then every discussions, every the progress we always put in the report, and we also put our reflexivity in the report as well. So donor knows not just the challenge in implementing our intervention, but the challenge in the interaction uh, as uh, as an organizations and with the community. So we need donor to know that it's not just challenges in terms of technical interventions, but there is also social challenges. There is also interaction challenges that we face that donor needs to know, and donor needs to give us more time that way. And we also develop in my particular project that I monitor, the Global West program. We also try to practice the photo voice. So by having the photo voice project, by ensuring the community taking their pictures, sharing their concern, it's really help us to understand what they want, what they feel, what but their perspective. So in our project, we really using the photo voice and their stories as well. But again, it's not easy because conducting photo voice, developing story, it takes time. So we only able to do that in a quite longer period of project. But for emergency response, which is quite probably just 1 month, 2 months, really not possible. And we really have face this conflict as well at the community as well. So we have to acknowledge that, and this acknowledgement always share to donor as well so that they know.
Thank you very much, Angie. Thank you very much, Lan, for that question, because it is absolutely true that most of these practices are sometimes sound idealistic in certain contexts. So it's also part of our role to know how to mediate or translate that, maybe not speak about reflexivity, but let's have a moment to reflect together about certain aspects. And how Angie was explaining that there are ways in which you can ensure you have that time, even as a requirement to donors, if you have that opportunity, because I also need to acknowledge that that is not the reality of the development sector in general. But thank you very much, Lan, for that question. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. It was so lovely to see some of our former students also joining. I also saw one of our incoming lecturers in development studies in the area in the audience. If I can also do a little bit of marketing and invite you all to attend, please, to the next webinar, which will take place on Wednesday, the 19th of August. It's going to be called Community Radio as a Catalyst for Participatory Development and Social Change. Now that we're thinking about innovative ways of actually advancing change, I think it's going to be a really interesting webinar to attend. Our speakers are Benu Aurora, Associate Professor of Practice, Jindal School of Journalism, and it will be moderated by Valentina Bau, which is one of our members of the executive committee at the DSAA also. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. Thank you, Angie, Tomer, Yuen, and David for joining and sharing with us.
Thank
It's nice
you
to see
Your experience.
everyone.
I know it is,
for
and please
participating.
stay connected. We want to keep this network growing, and we want to know how well you are doing in your workplaces. And it fills our hearts also to know that you actually found what we did in the class useful. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Um,
Bye-bye.
see
Thank you,
you in August.
everyone.
Yeah.
Take care.